I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. This is certainly not the way. So when we were asked to do this presentation, it was probably back in maybe January or February, and I think little did we know how the world was going to change over the next few months. So I want to thank the Wilmington Business Journal for the opportunity and for the invitation to speak today. It's my second time participating as a seminar participant, and it's always it's a great joy to be here with you guys today, or with you all today. And again, I appreciate it. So we have a little bit limited amount of time, so we'll go ahead and dive right on in. Just as a thing of introduction, let me go ahead and knock that out. This disembodied voice that is talking to you this morning, I'm Dr. Stephen Hill. I work at UNCW. I'm an associate professor of business analytics, which is my primary role, but I also direct our master's program in business analytics, which, if you'll pardon me, I'm gonna plug the program a little bit at the end. I'll try to save any of the sales pitchy kind of stuff until the last slide or two, but be forewarned, there's going to be a little bit of that right at the end. I graduated from the University of Alabama in 2008. And have been on the faculty at UNCW since 2012. I've been teaching really ever since I was in graduate school. And so I guess I'm looking at, I was trying to add this up the other day, and I was preparing this slide, and I guess it was kind of shocking to think it's been 15 years since I taught my first class. So 15 plus years of teaching experience, and 8 at UNCW. And so while most of my experience has been confined into something of an academic environment, I've been privileged to work in a couple of different consulting roles, as well as some involvement with some nonprofit organizations here in Wilmington. So my email address is down at the bottom. It's the sort of standard UNCW email. So it's my last name and then the letter S, and you're welcome to reach out to me. So I'm happy. It's one of my favorite things to do is analytics education. I'm happy if you've got Excel questions or spreadsheet questions or data questions. I'm happy to help you with those, or at least try to point you in the right direction towards a resource that might be able to help you out. So what are we going to talk about today? Let's take a look at a quick overview of the presentation. So the first thing I want to do is just sort of level the playing field. I think there is at times some, I don't want to say confusion, it's probably not the right word, but there is some ambiguity about what the word and the term analytics actually means. And so I'm going to give you sort of my perspective on that. I'm going to talk a little bit about what an analytics professional actually looks like. So if you're hiring someone for a role that's going to be heavily involved with analytics, what type of person perhaps should you be looking for? And so we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of analytics applications. I'm a huge sports fan, so I'm going to go ahead and slide in a little sports example there for you in that part of the presentation. I've got 3 quick tips for you about working with analytics within an organization, and then I'll close with my not so subtle sales pitch for some of the things that we're doing at UNCW related to analytics. So first of all, let's just define analytics and just kind of get that out of the way. If you go to Google, for example, and you Google what is analytics, you're going to find probably hundreds of different definitions and people's sort of personal takes on what the concept of analytics actually means. My background is actually in operations management, and a key word we use in that field is transformation. And when we talk about transforming things, we're taking some types of inputs. You can imagine in an operations setting, you're taking raw materials and transforming them into a finished product. So I sort of leaned on that background to use the word transformation. And what we're doing in analytics is we're transforming data, and data in this sort of day and age is nearly ubiquitous, and it's really cheap to obtain and really cheap to store. I don't know about you, but personally, I rarely ever delete anything. I'm a bit of a data hoarder at times. I've filled up hard drives with stuff I may never use again. I never delete a photo. I never delete a text message, an email, anything like that, because it's almost trivial to store data. And this is very different if you think about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even a decade ago to some degree. Data storage and data management was certainly a bigger issue than it is now. Now, it's still an issue, but it's become less of that as storage has become cheap and very accessible. So we're going to take data and we're going to transform it into information. So we're going to add value. Whether we're taking a messy data set that we've obtained, we've got data from our customers or from point of sale or from a web interface or whatever the case might be, we're going to take that data and we're going to add value by boiling it down to what's important. And then from there, we're going to generate insight. So insight is really the most important thing. It's the actionable things, the actionable takeaways that we can get from our data. So I'm going to define, just for the purposes of this presentation, of course, this is the same definition that I use in class. I'm going to define analytics as this sort of broad idea of transforming data to information to insight. And all along this path, we're going to do 3 different types of analytics. And so when we talk about taking analytics, we can break it into 3 silos, although they are silos that interact. And so descriptive analytics, for example, predictive analytics, and prescriptive analytics. So these are going to be our 3 areas in which we primarily do our analytics function. Which one of these functions is the most important? Well, I would argue, and I teach an MBA class, for example, at UNCW, and I suspect that many of those students are not going to become analytics professionals or practitioners. Many of them are going to go work in finance, or they're going to work in marketing or management or whatever the case might be. But the important role that they're going to take analytically is likely to be a descriptive one. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But in terms of summarizing data, in terms of creating effective data visualizations that tell a story, I'm a huge fan of the development of dashboards for looking at glanceable information. Many of them, if not all of them, are going to be doing those kind of things, or they're going to be working with data in that type of way. They may not end up developing a fancy predictive model or a prescriptive model, but should have some basic understanding about what those types of models entail. So another thing that kind of comes up when we talk about analytics and the ambiguity of what that term means is a distinction between analytics, data science, and the term big data. So you hear these 3 terms sort of thrown around pretty regularly. This is a plot from the Google Trends tool. If you haven't checked it out, I would strongly recommend that you do so. It's you can definitely waste away an afternoon checking out the trends that occur in Google. And basically what is being presented here is a normalized volume of search terms. And so the green line represents searches for the term analytics since the year 2007. The blue line represents searches for the term data science, and big data is represented by the orange line. And so you can see really since, about 2009, 2010, we've seen a pretty steady interest in the term analytics. And I think that's appropriate because personally, I sort of view analytics as a broad, extremely wide-ranging sort of topic. It's one of the things that I truly love about analytics is that we can apply it in so many different areas, whether it be business or healthcare or sports or whatever that example might be. We've seen an increase in interest in data science. And so our data science friends play such an important role of building the tools and developing the algorithms and the technical tools that we need in order to do our job in an analytics role. So I like to think that I'm pretty good at working with data and interpreting results, but as an analytics person, building those tools is certainly not my specialty. And so we would turn that role over to our friends in data science who tend to be more technical. And then finally, I'm somewhat grateful that the term big data seems to be, I don't want to say going away, but on the decline. It became something of a buzz phrase around 2014, 2015. And fortunately, we've seen because it's if you want to talk about ambiguity, it is a term that is extremely ambiguous. And it's a term that there's a real issue that we see with people not in that big data is contextual. So a data set that is large and is difficult to manage for me is a drop in the bucket for a firm like, a Tesla or a Zillow or an Airbnb or a Google or something along those lines. And so to have that term filled with such ambiguity and it's so context dependent start to fade away, I think makes a lot of sense. And so we're going to focus on analytics and data science as we move forward. So, and some of this is in the next slide, some of this has changed a bit as we've entered a recessionary period, as we've been battling the pandemic, both in the US and worldwide. So this data is from a couple of years ago. And I think will probably speak more to the interest in data science and analytics professionals when we enter something of a recovery. Now, I will add a little note about that in a moment, about how robust the data science and analytics employment landscape is, even in a recessionary period. We'll talk about that in just a second. But just there was some idea at one point in time, and I think it still holds largely to be true as we look to the future, is that the demand for analytics professionals easily outpaces the supply. And so for those who are looking at making a career change, those of you who are looking maybe to become a subject matter expert in a particular area, having an analytics component to that knowledge can be really, really important. For example, some of the students that have gone through our master's program, they're not going to leave their current roles. They're going to stay. They're going to be a real estate agent. They're going to work for an insurance company. They're going to, stay as a staff member at the university. But what they're going to do is they're going to take those analytic skills and embed them in their current job. And so there's tremendous value in doing that. So what does the analytics professional actually look like? So what do I mean when I talk about working in a role in analytics? So if you are looking, so there's sort of two perspectives here. If you're looking to become an analytics professional, what are the things that you need? And then on the other side of this, if you're a firm and you're wanting to hire people for an analytics role, what do you look for? And so I would say that the perfect analytics professional falls sort of at the center of this diagram. They're going to have three skill sets that, I'll be honest with you, it's very difficult to find someone who is phenomenal at all three of these things. And so I've talked to some local firms, for example, and they've been able to, on a rare occasion, identify, a student coming out of a program or someone moving from a different role who actually has these three skill sets. But what you're more likely to find is to find someone who is really, really good at one of these areas and is hopefully at least, I don't want to say competent, but at least has some competencies in these other areas. So business understanding, of course, is critical. Understanding the context of business decisions. Simply being able to communicate. In my personal history, I've rarely ever actually been, when I was in school, I was rarely ever actually the smartest person in the room. But I was good at communicating things. I was good at teaching my fellow students. I was good at being a tutor and then ultimately being a faculty member. And so that in my mind is as important, if not more important, than some of these other areas. To be able to convince a manager or a C-level executive or to work with clients, those things are going to rely on your ability to communicate. And then finally is technical skill. Analytics is a technical field. It is probably in many ways less, I'm going to kind of use air quotes, less mathy than you might think, but it does require a sense of technical ability. Our friends in data science, for example, they're going to be loaded with technical skill. As an analytics professional, I'm trying to have some depth in all three of these areas: the business understanding, communication ability, and technical skill. If you're interviewing someone and you come across someone that sits at the center of this diagram, hire them, because they are rare. So they're kind of that analytics unicorn. They're out there, they're just hard to find. So what do we do in analytics? So, I've defined analytics for you. I tried to sort of reduce some of our some of our ambiguity. Here's what we're going to look for if we're looking for an analytics professional. Let's shift a little bit to talk about some of the use cases for analytics. And so fortunately, and I think this is one of the most exciting things for me about analytics, and it makes me excited. Again, I'm a professor. I can sort of choose my own adventure as far as what things I want to look at. Is one day I can be working on a sports project, and the next day I can have a student that comes to my office. And this is a real thing that happened. I had a student come to my office, and her words were, "I like analytics and I like dogs." And we were able to develop an analytics project for her where we were able to figure out what are some of the factors that lead to successful dog adoptions, right? I mean, you may never think that those two topics would be related to each other. I would challenge you, at some point in time, take a topic that you're interested in, go to Google, enter that term, and just put the word analytics after it. I will almost guarantee you that almost every term that you can think of, someone is doing some type of analytics related to that. Whether, again, staying in a sports context, ultimate frisbee, lacrosse, some of these perhaps less popular sports, there are people doing analytics. But of course, in a business context, HR, marketing, supply chain, finance, healthcare, and of course I tacked on sports down there at the end. We're using analytics skills in all of these areas. And as I've mentioned several times already, that's the thing to me that makes analytics truly exciting, is being able to take these skill sets and apply them in different areas. And so if you have a student that you hire, or if you have a professional that moves into your organization who has these analytics skill sets, train them up so that they become, competent in your subject. So, if you're working for a clinical research firm, for example, hire someone, give them a little training about clinical research, and they can apply those analytic skills to add value to your organization. So I want to look at three sort of specific examples of analytics uses, and we'll kind of move through these quickly. I'll give you a couple of tips, and then we'll be getting near to the end of the presentation. So one application of analytics that I've seen, evolve really over the last few years, last decade or so, is text analytics. So text data is sort of notoriously difficult to analyze. As an analytics, professional, we're used to working with numeric data, sort of the way that data is classically presented to us. Text data is very different in that it's not by its nature numeric. It's not by its nature quantitative, but a whole field of analytics, of text and unstructured analytics, has developed around this unstructured, more qualitative type of data. And so one example comes from a data set from a women's clothing online retailer. And so here we're seeing some data related to customer reviews and recommendations. So if you're working in an organization where customers have the opportunity to provide comments and feedback to you in a text form, you can extract interesting insights and meaningful value from that text data. So for example, these are just word counts. It's a simple analysis. These are word counts from customer reviews. And so things like love, fit, size, look. And then we can go a step further and we can correlate these words with whether the person had a positive perception of the product or a negative perception of the product. And so you can imagine a firm like Amazon, for example, how many millions of comments do they receive about products every day? Or, thinking about Zappos or someone like that, right? They're using automated processes to go through and to evaluate those comments to be able to better match you with products, and to be able to determine, what are the features of products that customers are excited about, or the features of products that customers are not interested in it. On a side note, I ended up, I don't know how many of you watched the debate last night. I don't want to get too far into politics, but I ended up capturing almost 1 million tweets that were tweeted during the debate last night, in order to be able to do some sentiment analysis, to be able to track how people's perceptions of that event changed throughout the event. So this is using the same example, and here the yes and no refers to whether the customer recommends a product or not. And so in green, you're seeing terms that people would typically use that are associated with them having a positive perspective or positive view of a particular product. Whereas in red, you're seeing words that are associated with a negative sentiment. They're having they're not feeling good about the product. They may not recommend it to others. And so being able to quickly look at a vast amount of customer reviews, to be able to look for some of these key words and being able to correlate those with whether the customer recommended the product or not, that can happen in a can happen much more quickly than if we were to do that in a manual sense. And you can actually start to see trends that maybe you wouldn't detect if you just had a human looking and reviewing these customer comments. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention healthcare. Obviously, this has been a very trying and difficult and painful last 6 months for many of us, and we've all been affected in some way. But there's a little bit. I hate to even use positive terms, but there's a little bit of a silver lining here, in that we've really started to see, I don't want to maybe say appreciation, but we've really started to see an interest in data over the last 6 months that I think is pretty unprecedented in recent history. People have become very interested in case counts, in hospital utilization. They've become very interested in positive test rates. These are things that we've never really thought about before, but now people are spending time visiting sites like this, looking at trends and patterns, trying to either make decisions for their family or make decisions for their firm going forward based upon trends and emerging patterns within healthcare data. And so I can't tell you how many hours I've spent, browsing dashboards, for example, looking at different ways that COVID-19 data is being presented to the public, as well as, within hospital systems or whatever that case might be. And so, like I said, it's really it feels weird to use a positive term around this event, but, for analytics, this has been an opportunity for us to maybe not shine, but an opportunity for us to demonstrate to the larger public the value of data, the importance of assessing the quality of data, and the importance of really having some insight into the types of analysis that are being done that are driving decision making, both globally, nationally, and then of course locally as well. On a bit of a lighter note, I had to throw in a sports example. This is from the New York Times. This is from the New York Times Fourth Down bot. On the left-hand side is a model that's developed that indicates how often or in what situations in NFL games a coach should go for it on fourth down, versus on the right, historically, when they have actually done that. And I think this is a descriptive analytics output from a predictive model. And so, or even really a prescriptive model to some degree. And so you can see the discrepancy very easily of when coaches have chosen to go for it on fourth down versus when they don't. NFL coaches have historically been very reluctant to take risk. And that is so evident in this type of graphic. Interestingly, we're seeing some change in this season, is that already the rates of teams going for it, particularly on fourth down and short situations, has already dramatically increased over previous seasons. So it's almost like the weird sort of disruption of this season, how the season sort of feels different. If you're a sports fan, no matter what sport you're following, if it's college football or regular NFL football, or, if you're a soccer fan or whatever, it just feels different. And so I'm wondering if that's changing the aversion to risk. So people in sports are willing to make decisions on the field that might normally be viewed as more risky. And I think also part of it is that teams are starting to really adopt and respect some of the analytics professionals. Tampa Bay, for example, that just won the Stanley Cup, is widely viewed as one of the one of the first and sort of prominent adopters of analytics in the National Hockey League. And so we're seeing that translate into success. One more sports graphic, and I apologize if you're a Falcons fan. They're just sort of easy fodder for these types of things. And really, you could take their last 2 games, and unfortunately, if you're a Falcons fan, the graphs look like this. And probably the most famous win probability chart of all time is from the Falcons and Patriots Super Bowl a few years back. And so you can see, for example, how the projection of the Falcons ultimately winning this game against the Bears changed over time. And so we can use this type of tool to evaluate decision making both as a game occurs. So a team makes a decision, how does it affect the likelihood that they're going to win the game? And we can do this sort of retroactively and generate something like this to say, well, this is what happened at this particular point in the game in which the game flipped and became more likely that the other team might win. And so, of course, there's also some implications here if you're into wagering. I won't say that too loudly. There are certainly some implications here for this type of data as well. All right, so 3 quick tips for you. So what can you do organizationally or even individually in order to keep with the sports analogy, to sort of get in the game when it comes to analytics? So I would say the first tip is to start small. And if you go back and if you look at the win probability chart, if you look at the 4th down projection thing, if you look at the COVID-19 case data, those are all visualizations that are all relatively simple. Now, maybe they have more profound and more technical models that are underlying them, but I think it's okay to say that in some ways, some analytics tasks are actually pretty easy. And some of the analytics tasks that can have the most impact can just be a simple visualization. And then taking that a step further and building a meaningful dashboard that can really change an organization, to be able to see in real time and to be able to offer a user an opportunity to explore data in a way that is not at all intimidating can be huge. And so for part of that for me is I am an Excel, like I love Excel. That's maybe a weird kind of geeky thing to say. I don't have an Excel tattoo yet or something, but I can't rule that out. Excel is the ubiquitous analytical tool, and so it is table stakes for analytics. I mean, I'll use the gateway drug analogy if you'll pardon that expression. It is how you start with analytics. An analytics professional is going to be it's going to be good at Excel, and so if you're not, then I would encourage you to seek out training. I guess there's opportunities at UNCW, but there's other opportunities as well, and get proficient at Excel. It can save your organization a ton of time. And of course, time is going to equate to money in those kinds of situations. And then once you get to the limits of Excel, then you can proceed and move into other software and other tools that might be better adapted for different situations. So starting small, keep it simple. Some of the most effective analytics products that I've ever seen have been simple and small and easy things. And some of the things that I've done, this leads into the second tip. Some of the things that I've done in the past have been overcomplicated, and I wasn't listening to the end user. So in particular, one consulting role that I was working in, I was designing a spreadsheet-based tool for them, and I got cocky and decided and was trying to show off. I was going to show off my Excel skills because I'm sure that was going to impress them. And they were not impressed at all because they didn't want the fancy spreadsheet. They wanted something simple. They wanted something simple that the workers, this was at a kind of an assembly type plant, that the workers could engage with and work with easily and not get lost in this crazy sort of spreadsheet environment. So as you develop an analytics tool, or as you develop products that are analytics based, it is so important to work with the end user. So maintaining that level of conversation and communication to develop clear requirements and clear specifications for a product. It is totally fine to build a minimum viable product, to build a simple, bare bones, it just barely works, it just barely kind of does what we want it to do sort of product to present to our, and again, when I'm talking about end user, that could be someone that's external to your organization, that could be a customer, it could be a client, or it could be someone within the firm yourself. It could be a manager, it could be a CEO, whatever that the case might be, and then work iteratively with the end user so that the product gets built. The most devastating thing for an analytics professional, I'm being a little dramatic, but the most devastating thing for an analytics professional is to build a product and to watch that product go unused. In fact, there's estimates that, for large scale projects, that something like 85 to 90% of those projects either fail or end up not being used. And I think a lot of it has to go with, you have a bunch of really smart people doing really smart things, but not actually talking to the people that are ultimately going to use the product. So iterate and add complexity as you go. And then tip 3 is, and I mentioned earlier, sort of trends and sort of ongoing patterns within the analytics profession. And I mentioned, there's demand outstrips supply, and so on and so forth. And so I had to go back because this wasn't in my presentation that I was going to give in March at the original conference, because things were very different back then. And I actually changed tip 3 from something else to this, because there is some concern that analytics professionals and data science professionals, are going to be adversely affected, from an employment perspective, through this period in which we find ourselves in. But I would make an argument that analytics functions can be, and I think in many cases have proven themselves to be recession proof. And so if you properly deploy analytics within an organization in such a way that analytics is creating value for your organization, then I think you can find that that group is invaluable. Those professionals are invaluable, and it's worth hanging on to them even in a difficult time. In fact, using analytics tools can be really, really effective at streamlining your organization, building in efficiencies, and really looking for cost reduction opportunities. So engaging the analytics professional there, rather than maybe looking to put them on the chopping block, can actually be a pretty smart thing to do. It'll be interesting to see how things change. I would not, and again, I'm pretty biased, but I would not caution you at all. I would say absolutely, if you're interested in analytics, go learn analytics tools. If you're interested in bringing analytics, into your organization in some more meaningful way, go for it. This could be the time where you can build a competitive advantage over your competitors because of your use of analytics, where others may be sort of turning their back on that because of the cost that's associated sometimes with those professionals. So I promised that I would not sales pitch you too much. So we're going to get done here a little bit, maybe a few minutes early as well. But I do want to mention just a couple of the opportunities that are available at UNCW if analytics is something that interests you. If you're interested in an undergraduate program, or if there's a family member that is, we do have an undergraduate major in business analytics. It's become one of the most popular degrees within the business school. And we offer a wide variety of courses. I teach some of those. We have great faculty members that teach courses in all kinds of disciplines, from business analytics to information systems to supply chain. Our economics faculty, our finance faculty are engaged with that as well. My sort of pride and joy is our online analytics master's program. We launched in 2018, and we currently have about 160 students enrolled. We bring in about bring in about 100 students every year. And of course, we've had some graduate, and it's been highly successful. And it's a 10-course program that you can complete in as little as a year. And again, it's fully online, so if you're a working professional, you can still work and participate in the program. There's a link down at the bottom of the slide, or you can email me directly, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. Again, whether you're someone who doesn't want to change your job, which I totally understand, but you want to, maybe you're a logistics manager, or I use the example of a real estate agent, or whatever the case might be, but you want to integrate some analytics into your current role, this is a great opportunity. The same can be said if you want to pivot and you want to move out of a role and into a different role. So that's an excellent opportunity that we provide. And then finally, I do a lot of work with our Swain Center for Executive Education and Economic Development. And we typically do face-to-face trainings, and I do a couple of those throughout the year. Obviously, things are a little bit different these days. And so predominantly we're doing those trainings in an online setting. I'm heavily involved in our analytics sequence, which is a 3-course sequence that we offer. And as I mentioned before, Excel is that entry point. Excel is table stakes in analytics. And so that's where we start here. And so if you want to get better at Excel, and you want to I love the term Excel ninja. Again, it's kind of a geeky term, but if you want to work towards that and work to improve your efficiency and reduce the amount of time you spend, battling a spreadsheet, we can work with you in this particular training opportunity. And again, my contact information is at the bottom of the slides. It's just hillS@uncw.edu. I would be happy to answer any of the questions that you would have. And I'm going to go ahead and in my screen share here, Michelle.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. That was an extremely informative presentation.
Oh, thanks. It's a pleasure. I wish we were doing this face to face, but
I know.
It is what it is.
Well, I'm definitely walking away with some powerful information. And if you ever get that Excel tattoo, you got to post it.
I will let you know. Yeah. So.
Okay. I haven't received any questions from the attendees. I just wanted to give them a second here. Just feel free to submit any of the questions into the chat box, and Dr. Hill would be happy to answer any questions. Absolutely.
And I would love to engage with you later as well. So if it's something that you want to talk about, it can be anywhere. Like I said, I love Excel. I mean, it sounds weird to say, but I spend a lot of time doing this kind of stuff, and I would be happy to, you're working on a spreadsheet and you've come into a particular problem and you've had trouble getting past it, feel free to reach out. Those are the kind of things I enjoy working on, and would love to connect with you.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, so much. Again, we appreciate your time, and I guess there are no questions, so we will hopefully they'll connect with you one-on-one.
That'd be great.
Okay.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody have a wonderful day, and I enjoy seeing you on the rest of the seminars and roundtables, and thank you for being a part of the Wilmington Business Conference and Expo. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.